Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Mark, which we've become very familiar with lately. Today we're hearing from chapter 12, verses 38 to 44, and it is the story of the widow's mite. So let us hear these sacred words. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at the banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearances say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of those who are contributing to the treasury, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put everything in, all she had to live on." May God bless our modern hearing of these ancient words.
In my first year of ordained ministry, I officiated a wedding for a young couple. He was in his late 20s and in the Air Force, and she was doing her student teaching year. And following the ceremony, I received a card in the mail thanking me for officiating the ceremony, and yes, showing appreciation for my doing so by including $8, a $5 bill, and 3 ones. So immediately I determined that I was going to send them this money back, as they were just starting out their marriage and clearly needed the more $8 a lot more than I did in the moment. And so I began to take out an envelope in the church office and put the cash back into the envelope to send the couple their money back, when my mentor in the office asked me, "What are you doing?" I shared with him that I was sending the couple their $8 back, and he said, "I have an alternative idea. Why don't you take those $8, put it in your shirt pocket, and let it stir your heart a little bit?" So I took his advice, and I bet you can know what happened to me next. With those $8 in my pocket, I began to consider my own kindness and my own generosity, and I realized that I was influenced by the gift of someone who in that moment had far less than I. Theologians often refer to this spiritual lesson as the lesson of the widow's witness. Namely, that when it comes to Jesus' kingdom, the kingdom is undergirded by a set of unusual virtues and is often influenced by unusual people. Walk back with me into this text. At the beginning of Mark chapter 12, Jesus shares back with the disciples that the kingdom of heaven is near, and it is about ready to come on earth for just a few moments in and through a rather unusual candidate. There in the temple, there are the teachers of the law, where they are said to have long flowing robes, and they're very prideful and very pompous. And then in the temple as well, there is this woman, a widow, with 2 coins. And she places these 2 coins into the temple treasury. And Jesus has the audacity in this moment to turn to his disciples and say, "I want you to know that this woman is a witness to you as you are to go forth in discipleship and as you are to go forth in loving others. For she has given not out of her wealth, but rather out of her poverty." Perhaps we would be wise to note about this story what Jesus did not say to that widow in the temple that day. Jesus did not say to that widow, "You can have your money back." Jesus did not say to the disciples, "Give this woman a refund." What did Jesus say? "I want this woman to be an example, an influence to all of you." You know, I got to thinking about that, the power of influence. And I thought about the week I had over this past week in following all the politics of our day and in following the election. And what have you and I been reading about over and over again? The power of influencers and influence in our election. For political scientists have been talking about it in article after article. Who decided to go on what podcast? Or who decided to get this recommendation from this person? Influence is precisely what we have been reading about day after day after day. And part of what is happening in this text is the disciples are being influenced by a really, really strange person and situation. Frederick Buechner, the great theologian, used to always say that good and thoughtful preachers spend their time with the Bible in one hand and with the news in the other hand. And I got to thinking, what does this woman who gives 2 coins in the temple treasury, what does she have to do with all of the politics that I've been following this week? And I came to a conclusion: absolutely nothing. Therein may lie the entire point. What if this woman is embodying a very different kind of alternative politics? What if she is defining back for the disciples precisely what it means to experience the kingdom of heaven on earth? That phrase, alternative politics, has been an important one in my own spiritual journey. For one of the books that has really mattered to me in my own spiritual journey has been John Howard Yoder's book, The Politics of Jesus. Yoder was a Yale theologian who many decades ago argued that people of faith often refer to Jesus using decidedly political language. Jesus is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Prince of Peace. We talk about Jesus' reign and Jesus' kingdom. And so if we use that language to talk about who Jesus is, part of what we're doing is we are making a claim about our alternative politics. A politics that perhaps looks nothing like the politics that we've been following of late. For I consider our congregation, and I know this morning within the congregation we have Republicans and we have Democrats. We have those who feel like they won this week and those who feel like they lost. But a sensibility that I sense that we all share is that the political cycle this year has been so divisive. Divisive for families, divisive for churches, divisive for places of work, divisive for neighborhoods, divisive for communities. And what I have found myself doing in recent weeks, and probably will do in the weeks to come, is I have found myself leaning a little bit more on the King of all kings, leaning a little bit more on my alternative politics. For I'll tell you, I and my family have been so grateful to be part of a church community that quite frankly embodies a very unusual set of virtues. You know, the kind of virtues that say, see that woman over there with 2 coins? Be sure to follow her witness. For I consider the virtues of the kingdom of heaven on earth at this church, and they are so unusual, at times the world may not even recognize them. I think about kindness being extended to all people. I think about the virtue of sharing love with veterans or sharing love for those who are in need of affordable housing. I think about the virtue of being an inclusive and open and affirming community where anyone, no matter their religious background, no matter their gender, no matter their race, no matter their sexual orientation, anyone can come and be part. Or I think about a series of compassion for children at our church, 7 weeks. Or I consider our own care for widows and for widowers. Or I think about what it means for our Justice Committee to host a seminar on having civil conversation and dialogue within our community. And I think about some of those kingdom virtues of heaven on earth at this church, and I must say that they are rather unusual. They're other, they're alternative. They're more like that woman over there with 2 coins putting in a contribution into the plate. As we journey forth as Americans and as we journey forth as a church, may we remember our alternative politics, our higher politics, politics of love and politics that are deeply fulfilling, more so than the politics of this world. I'll close this morning with one of my favorite stories, and this story has been in and around the study of homiletics for decades. For the story of the widow and the coins is in multiple different gospels, and this story has been told by multiple different preachers across denominational lines. It's the story about a widow who was a younger widow as her husband had recently passed away of a very aggressive form of cancer. And in having her husband pass away of cancer, this widow was really, really struggling, but she still managed to come to church every Sunday, and every Sunday she would put into the offering plate $4, gave almost $200 a year. And one Monday morning, when the money counters at the church were seeing what this woman was doing, they realized that this woman was misusing her finances, perhaps, contributing money to the church when she had far greater needs. And so the money counters of the church, they were supposed to be confidential, but they weren't on this occasion. They went and found the minister and said, "You need to visit with this widow. She is misusing her finances, making gifts to the church. Tell her she doesn't have to do that." So on a Wednesday afternoon after school, the minister decided to visit with her in her home and said, "Sunday after Sunday, you're giving us this money in the offering plate. No. Let us be of assistance to you." At which point the widow began to cry. And she said, "Preacher, do not rob me of my dignity. For every Sunday morning when I put those $4 in the offering plate, I am reminded that I am more than this house that I live in. And every Sunday morning when I put my $4 in, I'm reminded that I'm more than the car that I drive. And every Sunday morning when I put my $4 in, I'm reminded that I am more than these clothes that I'm wearing. For every time I make my gift, I realize that I am part of the kingdom of heaven on earth, and that my life and my trust is completely in the hands of God." The minister said absolutely nothing. He walked back out to his car, and he realized that in that moment, he was in no position to minister to her. She was in position to minister to him. In our world that is so full of pride, pomp, polls, and what's in the pocket, may we never forget the widow and her coins. May she encourage us forth.